sometimes these stories take a life of their own.
Yeah, they all should. If they're organic, they all should because you have an idea. And then Billy Friedkin used to say that. He goes, there's the movie you want to make. He says, then there's the movie you make, and then there's the movie you're left with. So you basically got three chances to get it right. In the screenplay form, the shooting part of it, and then the editing part is almost the editing and writing are the closest because you're retelling the story as an editor. It's like your last chance to get the screenplay right.
Now, if you're just a writer and
Mm.
that's just your function, how do you feel about what you've written? Then now you have someone else like a director who's now that's their vision, and then you have an editor, which is still a whole other vision. Do you feel? Have you ever felt a little bit like, God, it's not the way I really wanted this to come out, or
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't happened to me that often. A lot of the stuff I wrote, I ended up directing. But I mean, early on with Wiseguys, Brian De Palma directed it. And look, people love that movie. I think he did a fabulous job. I think he saw it a little sillier than I did. I had a tougher version of it in my head, probably a little closer to Midnight Run. But I saw that movie, with people in the theater, they were howling. So I was like, okay, great. You know, and then Midnight Run, obviously, Marty did a phenomenal job. I talked to Marty yesterday. Uh, and, I was on the set every day. So I had a really good idea of what that movie was going to be. I said to Marty, I basically begged him. I said, look, I want to be a director. Can I just watch? And he said, yeah, just don't fucking bother me. And I went, no, I'm not going to say shit. So that was the best film school you could go to. I was on the set every day watching Midnight Run get made and the actors working shit out and coming over to Marty and Marty saying, try it this way, try it that way. And I was like, wow. And obviously the movie, people consider it a classic, some people do. Um,
well, going back to George, going back to Wiseguys. I mean, again, that was one. I don't know why it always stood out of my mind. I know why, 'cause it's a great movie, but it always did, and this was growing up in South Philly, right? And I'm sure New York and Jersey and everywhere, all these neighborhoods, these Italian American neighborhoods. It was like it was that Pope of Greenwich Village. These things were like must see,
yeah, they're iconic in our lives.
iconic, and Godfather obviously, but really more neighborhood. Like you felt you like we were part of it because your neighborhood reflected the Pope of Greenwich Village as well as Wiseguys. But
Mm.
I think the magic was with Piscopo, tremendous actor and comedian, and DeVito and Captain Lou. I tend to think that people really kind of, even though it was comedic, and there was a little bit of a Three Stooges element, I think, to that. A
Oh
little
yeah.
bit, a little undertones there, the absurd, and
Yeah.
but it was just so endearing. I think some of the acting too, if I'm not mistaken, especially I see it in DeVito. Some of it maybe was a little ad libbed. There were some things in there I could tell maybe weren't on the written page, but they pulled it off
I
great.
used to react more emotionally when I was younger to things because I wasn't seasoned. I didn't have the wisdom of time, and only time can make you wise. And hopefully, I know a lot of guys that are older who are still fucking fighting the same stupid battles they were 30 years ago. But over time, I got used to the idea that, you put something into the world and you just have to know that people are going to say really stupid, hurtful things. And at first I didn't understand it, but guys like us, we come from a certain neighborhood. We were raised a certain way. And when we see things like Wiseguys, even though it's a silly movie, or I mean, I don't want to denigrate it by saying silly, but it's certainly a comedy. But there's a lot of truth in that movie, in the behavior, and you and I and guys from South Philly or Jersey or, my neck of the woods in New York, we look at that movie, we laugh because right away we know all those people. Like, oh, this reminds me of my Uncle Ernie, or this reminds me of that. We all know those, especially then, those habitual gamblers. I mean, those guys that I knew guys that like would salivate when they talked about the racetrack. They almost get a napkin. They're such fucking degenerate gamblers, and I never was prey to that, but I recognized it and I always found it hysterical. Like this is my ship coming in, it's like this is what I've been waiting for, and it's like and there's a lot of tragedy in that behavior too, because they're never going to get out of the hole that they're in, and but like you're smiling because obviously you're recalling a million incidents that you remember growing up. So like when I wrote Wise Guys, that was pretty much I was writing about my uncle and my dad and people I knew, and a lot of stuff that my dad said ended up in Wise Guys.
And that's some of the things that yeah, I learned from the neighborhood. You would go, I grew up in the Italian market, so I mean, South Philly Italian market. It's like you're growing up on Mulberry Street, basically. And
Yeah, I
yeah,
love Philadelphia. I mean, I've always had a soft spot in my heart for Philly. I I loved going down there, and like I say, I had that affinity for Bucks County. So then I'd go down to Philly, and then I'd go into Bucks.
well, yeah, of course, we have the art museum, which it's even Stallone says it in Rocky. Oh, all these years I've been going up these steps. I never realized there was artwork in that place. Whatever,
Expensive
whatever.
artwork in there. Yeah, well, I know that. I know the Philadelphia Museum of Fine Arts. I know that very well. Then there's the Michener too in Bucks County.
But Philly's still a strong arts town. All right. Well, look, George. I mean, going through the path, here you go. It all started with that one phone call,
Yeah,
and then you haven't looked back. I mean, so you did that. The option, your first screenplay, unfortunately, never got made. But then you got
yeah.
Wise Guys. Wise Guys gets made, and then right after Wise Guys was it Midnight Run?
No, I'll tell you. After Wise Guys, I wrote Bad Boys. Bad Boys didn't get made for about 10 years, but I wrote Bad Boys. I wrote it for Don and Jerry. And that was back in the day when it was a much different Hollywood. They were always, and a lot of it's just timing. It's like, in 1963, the world needed the Beatles. You know what I mean? So like, and there they were. It's like I dropped into Hollywood exactly the right time to be a screenwriter with a head full of ideas. Today, I don't think I would have a career because I don't want to adapt books. I can adapt a book, but or take this comic book and turn this into a movie. Yeah, I fucking rather die. But I just it's just not interesting to me. I like comic books, but Jesus Christ, I mean, it's just set piece, set piece, set piece, set piece, clever line, set piece, set piece, set piece, clever line. And you know, I it's not challenging to me. Human behavior is challenging to me, and so I wrote Wise Guys. It gets made, so I got a little bit of heat. Then that's like 1986. Then I wrote Bad Boys in '87. I sold it to Don and Jerry, and what I meant by that, when I wrote an outline for it, like I say, it's a different world today. I went in and I met Don Simpson, who was sitting behind his desk, and he goes, "What do you got?" He goes, "I liked Wise Guys." And these guys, they were like sharks, but they were smart for talent, not like today at all. Today, they meet a writer, then they have to take a meeting on the writer, and then they have to take a polling on the writer, and then they have to do research on the writer, and then they go to some shopping center and they take the idea that the writer pitched them, and then they ask 1,000 people, "Is this a movie?" You can't make anything that way. That's fucking madness. What did Jimmy Breslin say? He said if a committee tries to design a racehorse, they'll end up with a blind camel. You can't fucking do it. It's not possible. You just have to go with your gut. You're talking about a movie. You're talking about a song. You're talking about a piece of art. You can't manufacture these things. There's always an X factor that makes it special. But anyway, sorry for this long diatribe. So I sat down with Don. I started pitching him Bad Boys. I got into the pitch about 3 minutes. He goes, "How does it end?" And I told him the end. He goes, "Good. I get it. Go write it." So those are guys that worked off their guts all the time. I don't see any of that today. I remember the first time when I came out to Hollywood and my agent started setting me up with meetings, and I met Mike Medavoy. And there's this guy sitting behind a desk with a fucking cigar about this big. And he didn't ask me about movie ideas. He says, "Tell me about yourself." That's what he asked me. Today, nobody gives a shit. You know, he said, "Tell me about yourself." I said, "Well, I'm from Portchester, New York." He goes, "Ah, I know Portchester. I used to go up there, blah, blah, blah." We used to go up there to buy our beer, and I tell him about my dad. He goes, What'd your dad do?" I said, "My dad was a working class guy. He was a bellhop at a country club. My mother was a hairdresser." he was far more interested in that. He goes, how'd you get to like writing? Or I said, well, I loved movies as a kid. And what these guys were doing is, which is, they had a natural thing again. They were like, when you're panning for gold, they were panning like for passion. That's really what they were up to. And that's how they did it. They didn't use, graphs and all this horse shit. They just looked into your eyes and they listened to you. So I flourished in that environment because I was good in a room. I love people. I always have, and I love their stories too. Most of writing comes from other people's stories anyway. You just figure out how to mold them into some plot. But so then I wrote Bad Boys. That was 86, 87. Then I started writing Midnight Run. That was a spec. And this is, again, I believe in God, man. This is just stone cold fate. I left my keys. I had a meeting at Paramount. I left my keys at Don and Jerry's office. I came back, and who comes walking through the parking lot but Marty Brest? And Marty is like, "Hey, George, how are you?" We start chatting in the parking lot. And he goes, "What are you working on?" Because he read Bad Boys. He goes, "I really liked it." He goes, "I just didn't want to do two cop movies in a row." Because he just done Beverly Hills Cop, which was a gigantic hit, obviously. He was like the hottest action comedy director on planet Earth. And I said, "I got this thing I'm working on about a bounty hunter." And I was literally on page 53. I remember it. And he goes, "Can I read it?" I go, "It's not finished." He goes, "Well, let me read it." I'm like, "It's not finished." And that's back, this is prior to computers. This is like when you wrote everything on an IBM Selectric with whiteout, and so I gave him the pages. He read it. And an hour later, he comes out of his office and he goes, "How does it end?" I says, "I don't know." He lets him go. And that was the beginning of the development of Midnight Run. So, but that's just pure fate, you know?
And how was it and now at that time, meeting De Niro? And now, obviously, you've had you've been his friend for many years. We just,
Yeah.
come back trail. And you're still at it with him. How was it like when you first met him? I know the story because I seen it on the podcast. Maybe it was. By the way, I got to just say this too. When I watched Mike Torsh's interview as well as Billy Gallo's interview of yours, both phenomenal, and I definitely want to plug them because whoever's watching should check those out too. But in one of those podcasts, you did mention, your father. I guess your father met De Niro, and the
Oh,
thing.
yeah, yeah. Bob, look, I have to tell you, Bob was, to me, and my family, just the greatest gentleman, gracious. He loved my father. For some reason, he just got a kick out of my dad.
Probably reminded him of his own. Maybe who knows?
Yeah, I'm sure. 'Cause my dad was just like an old school Italian guy, with no fucking interest in movies or other than he loved them, but he thought I was nuts for wanting to do this shit. I mean, really crazy because you're fucking nuts. This is never going to happen. I'm like, I got to try, Dad. And then at the end of my father's like, did I tell you this story? Do you know this one? My dad, he was getting old. He's in his mid 80s, and he came up to the house. We have a house in the Hollywood Hills. And we were fucking broke, our whole lives. And he was sitting in the back. He was watching the sun go down. I get choked up thinking about it. And he's looking around. He's looking around. He looks at the house. And he looks at my wife. And then he looked at me. He goes, "Thank God you didn't listen to me." I always remember him saying that.
Yeah, that's look, same thing. Italian. I don't know if it's just the Italian culture, but there's a story. Frank Capra, right? Big name, big. Back in the old days. Frank Capra's mother. There's a story where he says that his mother, they were at some sort of an awards, and he brought his mother, and his mother's looks at him, and she looks like a little bit discouraged, and he's like, "Well, what's the matter, Ma?" She's like, "Well, when you want to get yourself a good job, because it
Yeah,
doesn't register."
it doesn't register. It never quite registered. You know, I mean, look, I got members of my family who, like, when I finished Midnight Run, they said, "Hey, let me read this thing you wrote that Robert De Niro's supposedly going to be in." I'm like, he's in it. We start shooting in 8 weeks. You're full of shit. So I sent it to him. It's one relative. I'm not going to mention his name. He literally called me back and said, "They paid you for this shit?" I went, "What?" He goes, was like listening to your bullshit for 2 hours. That's what it was like. They paid you for this? I went, "Yeah, they paid me." He goes, Yeah, well, those corporations, they need write-offs, you know. So I'm like, oh, fuck you, man. I mean, thanks for the support, you know. Anyway,
That sounds about right. Yeah.
oh, it's the truth. And then I mean, I could tell you another story. I mean, I think all these stories, it's like I got a job once, this friend of mine, Howie, he was the manager of the movie theater in Mamaroneck, New York, and I lived in Mamaroneck for about 4 or 5 years. And I was so broke. He said, "Look," he goes, "I could get you money." He says, "If you change the marquees and you change the posters, and the one sheet you hang them all up, and then you go up on the ladder and change the this and the that." And I was always making these Super 8 movies. I'm running around town, and a couple of these fucking goofballs walked by when I was up on the ladder, and one of them said, "That's as close to Hollywood as you're ever gonna get." So what assholes. But I mean, I had the last laugh because I went back to Mamaroneck, and Midnight Run was on that same theater that I used to hang the letters on. But
So you probably gave a lot of people, as they say, ajda.
I'm I hope so. They certainly gave it to me.
So you did all this, and obviously leading up to well, we're here now. We're here at Comeback Trail, and you have plenty of great accomplishments in between. But I love this movie. I got to tell you. I mean, I told you, I texted you. I told you, I watched, and I just loved every second of it. It was
Thanks.
funny. There were so many little nuances, things I really didn't even expect. So it wasn't predictable at all. I think it was a fantastic movie.
I tell you what's great about it is that's another movie that happens by accident. It's like I wrote that script with Josh. That script was around for 10 years. We couldn't give it away. I mean, we gave it to people and they read it and they all said the same thing. The movie's hysterical, but it's a movie about making a movie and they're making a Western and the characters are not terribly likable. I'm like, yeah, that's the joke. But people are fucking morons. A lot of the suits or whatever you want to call them. They're just so careful and they don't. Anyway, if they could just learn to think outside the box, I think the business would certainly be much better for it. But that was one of those things out of the blue that Bob called me after he had done The Irishman. And you hadn't talked to him in about it, I'd say a year and a half, 2 years. He called me, he goes, "Georgie, it's Bob." And I went, "Oh, hey, how are you?" It's always nice when Robert De Niro calls your house. And he says, "Georgie, I've been doing this thing, The Irishman. It hadn't come out yet." And he goes, "I'm in a fucking dark place, man." He goes, "I played this bad, bad, bad guy, and I've been in this guy's head for a year." He says, "I need something really fucking stupid, silly." I went, "Well, I got the silliest thing you're ever gonna read." And he goes, "Send it to me." Just like that. And this is after 10 years of like trying to peddle this script. He calls me back 2 days later. He goes, "Georgie, this is hysterical. How come nobody's made it?" I says, "I don't know, Bob. You want to do it?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'll do it. I'll play the producer." So I said, "Okay, would you let me direct it?" He goes, "Yeah, of course I'll let you direct me." I was, holy fuck. After 10 years, out of
Fate,
the blue, it's like getting hit by lightning. And then he said,
fate, George, fate.
"Well, yeah, fate." And then he goes, "Who do you see as the cowboy?" And I said, "I don't know, Tommy Lee Jones." He goes, "I know Tommy. I'll call him." And I went, "Okay." And then I knew Morgan from other movies I'd done with him. So then it comes together in like a week. And then it went from, and that was like, I think in January or maybe December. And then Bob said, "I got to start shooting by May because I got to get out by a certain date." And I went, "Okay." And I hung up the phone. I go, "Okay, where am I going to find like $20 million in the next like 8 weeks? Because I got to start prep because I can't fuck around. There's a lot of prep in a movie like that." So I called Richie Salvatore and Dave Ornston and a couple of producer guys I knew, and they found the money. They put the money together with that cast. It got a lot easier. It was all foreign pre-sales and blah blah blah. And then my wife Julie, put together $1 million, and we
Great.
made the movie.
Where'd you film it at, George?
We filmed it in Albuquerque and outside of Santa Fe and near Taos, New Mexico, because they're making the Western.
Yeah, because I could tell the location looked really. I said I don't think that's California, but
I
and
know.
it's tough to film in California anyway. We all know that.
Yeah, with the tax issues, they're trying to change that now. I hope they do. But
And I hope they save that. I mean, look, just from my little neighborhood here, I've been rooting for LA, California for a long time because look, when you're there, and I've lived out there, my the thing is like maybe when you're there so long you don't really notice it because you kind of used to it, but from afar, not just here, but also I'm sure across the world, they don't want to see Hollywood collapse because that is like the shining palace on the hill that we all, even though it may be an illusion to an extent, we still don't want to see Hollywood collapse.
No, it represents something, certainly. I mean, I think right now, look, the pendulum is always swinging in life. I think right now, it's the business has changed in that it's certainly not the business that I got involved in, where people, like I say, loved original content, couldn't wait to meet a writer that had a new idea, and I had a million of them. I'm not saying they were all good ideas, but I did have a lot of original thoughts, and so I flourished in that environment. Like it has changed now, and I think the habit of going to the movies is has ebbed away little by little by little, and I think it's just gigantic tentpole movies. It's these 200, $300 million movies that are in the theaters, and an occasional horror movie, which may or may not cost very much money because horror movies tend to do very well. But the old school action comedies, those are all being made now by Netflix, Amazon, and things like that. So these movies are now they're all streaming, and it's just a different world. So that's I kind of sensed it coming. So I bailed fairly quickly and I started doing these more independent movies where now I'm firmly entrenched in this independent world. I got to tell you, for all of its headaches, I love making independent movies. I mean, Comeback Trail is exactly what I wanted it to be. I didn't get any notes. I didn't get any bullshit. When you're working at a studio, like I don't want to like make people depressed, but I have friends that are editors who tell me these nightmare stories where, they're making some $300 million movie. There's 18 fucking executives on the movie. Each one has a different opinion. And it's not even about the movie. They're jockeying for positions in terms of their jobs. Hey, that was my idea. No, that was my idea. So the movie almost becomes secondary to their political positions at the studio. Then they completely destroy the movie with 18 sets of notes. They fire the director. He goes on to another movie. Then they bring on a whole new team of editors. Then a lot of those 18 folks that were at the studio, they all went to different jobs. Now another 10 people come in. They see the movie fresh for the first time. They have to shit on it and make it theirs. They throw out all the old notes. Now they start working on the movie, making it. How do you make anything good that way? It was probably fine the first time. So I just don't want to do that. Okay. That's my choice. I don't want to do that. The money in that stuff is fantastic. I know guys that make failure after failure after failure. They're still making $5 million, a picture. But I just not what I want to do. It's not what I want to do. And I don't need any help fucking up a movie. I could do it on my own. So I'd rather at least be in control of it to the best of my ability and make the best thing that I know how to make. They're not all masterpieces. It's hard. When you look at a director's career, you look at a director's work. If there's three great movies, that's insane. Even if there's one great one and there's 30 others, if you're lucky enough to make 30 movies. I mean, a lot of, it's just like you do the best you can. I'm always trying to swing for the fence on every one. Billy Freakin said to me, you'll work just as hard on your failures as you do on your successes. Sometimes you work even harder on your failures because you're trying to get it right. For whatever reason, it hits the ground funny when you're shooting it and people aren't getting along, and that gets in the movie somehow, and you can't recover. And then you read that you suck. It's like, well, no, I don't suck. I got dealt a rotten hand. But you have to, look again, to be in Hollywood, you have to be, I think, talented and have very thick skin. So, you know,
And George, it's like and again I bring up Von Stroheim because I'm a big fan of Sunset Boulevard. It's one of my iconic movies in my
one of my favorites.
Casablanca. I mean, beautiful movies, but I found von Stroheim an interesting guy, and I was reading a lot about him. And one of the things that he said was, in Paris, if you made just one good film as a director or a filmmaker, or just one good movie, people will honor you. People will tip their hats to you in the streets for the rest of your life. In America, you're only as good as your last film.
Yeah, in America, you suck. It's not only, it's just horrible. Like my friend Nick Vallelonga,
Great guy.
great guy, wrote and produced Green Book, won 2 Oscars. Nobody gives a shit sometimes. It's like amazing. And that's a few years ago. He goes to Italy, they roll out the red carpet, people are throwing themselves at him, and it's just crazy. I don't look again, but if you're doing it for accolades, I'll tell you something else. If you're doing it for accolades, you're doing it for the wrong reason because that stuff evaporates, and you got to do it because you really care about it and you really like it. I really like it. Sometimes I love it and sometimes I can't stand it. Okay. But as a general rule, I get excited about the prospect of making a movie, and you can't do it like, oh, they're really going to like me if I do this because you're not going to get that, and it's there's a great quote that that is a quote to live by if you're an artist. And it was in a book called The Art Spirit. There was a painter by the name of Robert Henry. He said a lot. He probably the greatest teacher of art in history. And anybody that wants to be a movie maker or a writer, doesn't matter, should read that book because it's about the spirit of being an artist. And he said, "Do not set out to create good work, but instead live a life where good work will become inevitable." And that's really how you have to live as an artist. This is what I do. Everything I do is about this thing, about collecting these thoughts, these experiences to try to give them back, in the best way that I can using my abilities. And that's what it means. And everything else is gravy, because someone's going to say you suck, you stink. People, there's a crew of people out there who can't wait to say that. And I'm sorry, but you can't do it for accolades because Green, going back to Waylon Green, Waylon said to me, "You're never as good or as bad as they say you are." And that's a good way to look at it. I'm not as bad as they've written about me, and I'm not as good as they've written about me. Sometimes you do something good, it's a fucking accident, I mean, it's the truth, So why something works and why something doesn't work, a lot of times that's like the movie gods, you know. Um, but you just keep going. You just keep going. You don't wait for applause. Like I don't mean to be redundant. Using the word redundant was we said at the top, but you just do the best you can. You just try to be honest and you do the work and you move on to the next thing because it's the journey, really.
In my opinion, the way I look at it is, and I'm sure you would agree, if you're looking to get into showbiz and whatever facet, whatever role, whether screenwriter, filmmaker, whatever, gaffer, do it because you love it. Don't do it for the money. Don't do it for the celebrity status. Don't do it for the right reasons because you have that passion, that vocation that you want to do it. Now, for the person who may be sitting, the young guy out there or an older person that's sitting there, either in Port Chester or South Philly or somewhere,
Right.
that's watching this and says, "Wow, I would love to do something as a screenwriter, as a filmmaker in that particular role." What advice, if any, would you be able to give them?
Well, it was advice that was given to me early on. And sometimes when you hear it, you don't, it doesn't register. But the most any advice I could give any writer is to write what you know. You know, like that doesn't mean you can't research something. There's guys that write great historical things, and men and women who write about things they've never experienced. But as a general rule, I would say to try to write what you know. You know, write what interests you. Don't try to second guess. The last thing I would do would say, well, if I do this and add this and do this, then that'll be a hit because, well, it doesn't work that way. Uh, Write what you know, write what you love. Probably not even what you know, write what you love. Because there's an interesting paradox that I have noticed. I'm not the first guy to say this. I've heard other people talk about it, but there's an interesting paradox in that when you try to please everyone, you end up pleasing no one, right? Because it feels like you're pandering, you know. But if you really love something and you express that, people will respond to the honesty of it because it's not bullshit, you know. That's like, like we've all met people. Everybody's being very polite and pretentious, and then some guy walks in the room, some woman walks in the room, and they're like a breath of fresh air because they're not monitoring every word they're saying. That's you instantly get attracted to that because there's truth in it. So that's what I would say, to stay truthful. Write about things that you are passionate about. Good thing where a writer has power over everybody else, and I would say this to any writer that's starting out, is if you write something, it's yours. They have to deal with you. If you write an amazing piece of work, the studio, the publisher, whoever it is, they have to deal with you. There are a million actors. There are a million producers. There are a million directors. I've been in those meetings where people say, how about so-and-so? Is he available? Move on. How about so-and-so? Is he available? They go through 30, 40, 50, 60 names like that. If you write something good and Vince wrote it, they got to deal with Vince. There's not 1,000 Vinces running around. So that's the one thing about being a writer where you got juice.
Well, that's a big advantage. So yeah, it's a good point. Something that I really haven't thought about, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And all right, well, George, what's going on in the future? Anything you're shooting for? Anything coming up that we
I'm
should
doing
be?
actually have a lot of projects. I wrote something called The Accidental Gangster, which I'm trying to get made, which is based on Ori Spato's book. Uh,
He was on our show before.
was he?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm doing that. Then I've got a kind of a thriller action movie that's, I think, a ton of fun called Gabriel's Hammer, about a priest that goes out and just throws devil worshippers out the window. I mean, it's just fucking fun. And uh, and then I have another thing I'm working on now called The King's Game, which is about a poker player who gets involved with the Russian mafia and has to start playing in these games to to squash a gigantic debt. It's a lot of fun. So they're those fun crime movies that I love to do.
Well, again, I'm just going to remind everybody, please make sure that I'm going to have a bunch of links in the description box. Make sure you're following George. Make sure you are watching the Comeback Trio. Watch all the other previous movies. A key thing I
Don't
remind.
watch all of them. Don't watch all of them. I'll give you the list of. There's a couple, three you should avoid.
But you make sure, as I tell all my audience, make sure you leave a review. Leave a review when you watch these things. It's important to leave reviews. If you loved it, go ahead, leave 5 stars. Do what you got to do on all these platforms
Do
because
what
it
you
does.
gotta do.
Do what you
Oh,
got
I haven't heard that in a while.
to do the right thing.
Do the right thing.
And that helps us out too, right? Especially when you're on the independent scene. I mean, George, to say you're an independent, I mean, when I think independent, I'm thinking, us in the back of the grocery store trying to do a quick little, but you're doing it on a higher level, which is great. And guess what? I think Hollywood's going to start realizing that, like you said, 18 people trying to give notes. That's going to shift because people are getting tired of that, and that the real tension is towards these independents now.
I
So
hope so. I hope so because I think there's better work being done there. I saw a movie last night. You got 10 more seconds?
yeah, take as much time as you want.
I saw a movie last night that Zach Braff stars in. It was an independent movie. I don't know what they made it for. I know they shot it in 22 days, he told me. I was riveted. And you think of Zach Braff, you don't think of him necessarily as a dramatic actor because he comes from a background of like this very fun light comedy growing up in New Jersey stuff. He played a cop. True story. He played a cop uh, whose daughter is battling heroin addiction. He was fucking amazing in it. And she was great, the girl that played the daughter. And it's just tough to watch, but it's so riveting and so believable and so unfull of shit. And that's the power of cinema when it's done the right way. I mean, I was knocked on my ass by this movie. It was so well done. And kudos to all those guys because those movies are impossible to get made. And they all just committed to it. And to shoot what they shot in 22 days is insane, because I mean, Comeback Trail was 25 days. That was insane. you know, because Bob had to get out early, like I said. But you know, those the independent movies, you never have enough time. You know, that's the one thing about making an independent. Did I get it? Did I get it? Did I get everything? Shit, I should have got, you know, you just don't have enough time. But I'd rather do that than, you know, have all the time and money in the world and, you know, what you're making is kind of a slick turd, you know?
And that must have been a little that might have been a little that must have been a little difficult too with comeback trip because there was a lot of scenes that weren't. I mean, you're dealing with animals. There's a lot of scenes there that don't always go right.
No, yeah, no kidding. Well, it's, yeah, I could tell you stories about that. Like, the one, you know, the one bull that just wouldn't do shit. You know, he was supposed to charge Tommy Lee Jones. He just fucking stood there. And we're like, get the fuck, what do you do? Fire a gun in the air? I need to get this thing to move. We tried everything. The trainer came and he was shoving it. And just looked at him like, don't fucking shove me. But he never chased after him. So finally, we shot the whole sequence and I put it together. I said, this bull is like blows. I don't know what to fucking do with this bull. So my friend said, I know a guy's got a bull. Uh, Making movies is nuts. He goes, I know God, it's got a bull up in Central California. So we all drove, we rented some equipment for the weekend. We drove up to Central California. Nice guy. He's got a ranch. He was a friend of a friend. And so we hung all this green screen, you know, and put up all this green screen. And then we just terrorized this fucking bull. And he was charging after everybody. This bull was different than the this is a young bull. This is like, fuck you, don't fuck with me. So like we'd be doing this and he'd come at you. So we had cameras set up everywhere. And then we used the plates. We shot backgrounds in New Mexico and then we married the sequences. You can't tell when you see the movie. It's the magic of movie making. But the bull was actually a resident of Central California. And in the movie, he's from Albuquerque.
I'm surprised the government didn't try to shake it down for bringing in out of town bulls.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, no.
There's and, you know it's that's again like I can imagine like geez you know you gotta worry about who's going to get hurt insurance like that to me would be like I would have a panic attack.
Well, thank God I don't have to worry about that shit. That's somebody else's job, you know.
All right, again, George, you've been a fabulous guest, man.
I hope so.
I don't want to take up more of your time because you've
I'm
been
not
great.
doing shit. It's Sunday. My wife will find something for me to do the second we get off the.
Stop saving you is what I'm doing.
Yeah, yeah, a little bit.
We also have an article coming out on Rowhome Magazine. All right, Rowhome Magazine. It's a Philly based, but it also serves New Jersey, Delaware, all over the place. And it's got a big viewership. So I'm going to plug them. Rowhome Magazine. Check out the article I have with Mr. George Gallo. That's going to be the winter edition. I write that quarterly. And what else? Make sure you're subscribed here. And if you have any comments, leave them. Any questions? Things are going great. I look forward to continuing. Please come back again whenever you want to talk to us.
Anytime, anytime, anytime. Call me. I'm home most Sundays doing nothing. So
Making gravy or
make
sauce.
the gravy. Yeah, my wife is an amazing cook. I married a great chef.
Oh, great. She's an actress. I mean, she's
She's
an
a
actress.
wonderful actress, and she's my best friend for 42 years.
I want to end it on this note with the fact that you've been married so long, with the fact that which I think is that's a beautiful thing. I really because that's very old school, and I believe in that myself. And also the fact that you made the success that you've made, and you've done the things you've done without affecting who you are. And I think it boils down to one word: professional. Being a professional in that industry and avoiding those parties and avoiding all those distractions. And you lived a great. I think you've lived a life that is that someone should probably like. For me, that would be my goal to live that type of lifestyle.
It wasn't always easy, but you know, like I said at the top, you know, you have to keep the well clean, you know.
Yeah, you have to do the right thing. I know it's a cliche, but you have to do
Do the right
always.
thing.
All right. Again, our guest has been producer, writer, director, you name it. He's done it all. Occasional truck driver too.
Yeah, I was. I tell you my worst story about being a truck driver. Do you have time?
Go ahead.
One time, this is like right out of a movie. I always remember this. You know, I had this shirt with my name on it, you know, and I wanted to be a filmmaker more than anything in the world. It was, you know, and I was driving this fucking truck. It was summertime in New York. And I had brought all the paper up to this floor. I was, you know, it was somewhere in the Bronx. And I brought, but it was a very tall building for the Bronx. And I brought all the paper up and I filled up all the machines and blah, blah, blah. And I'm waiting for the freight elevator because that's what I'm supposed to be on, not the regular elevator where the secretaries and everybody were, the big shots. And I'm like, I'm waiting for this elevator, and I'm waiting for this freight elevator. I was like, fuck this. I'm taking a regular elevator. So I wheel the cart in there. So maybe I'm on like the 18th floor, okay? And some old dude gets on with me. I mean, guy had to be 80 and change, right? He let a fart go in this elevator. It was the most noxious, horrible, rancid, fucking puke stink you could ever fucking imagine. It was horrific. I was like, oh, Jesus Christ. And the door opens and he leaves. And it goes down 2 stories. And maybe 5 or 6 of these beautiful secretaries, because it was lunchtime, walk on the elevator. And it's just me and the stink. And they were like, oh, and I was like, I'm like, it wasn't me. But I mean, what the fuck? You talk about feeling like a loser, I had that moment of certitude where I was like, I'm gonna ride with the hoi polloi on the elevator. They're not better than me. And like God said, oh yeah, anyway.
This is proof that God has a sense of humor.
God has a great sense of humor.
That's fantastic. You should have put some that scene in one of your movies.
I may.
George, you've been great, man. I haven't laughed this much in a long time. I appreciate it.
Good. I'm glad. Good. Next time I'll tell you some more fart stories.
Yeah. All right. Again, now, and listen, your whole life, George, I have to admit, your whole life has been part of the grand design. Would you say it has
a part of the grand design?
It's part of the grand design.
Yes.
You've been great. I thank you again, George. We'll catch up with you real soon. All right.
I hope so. God bless, my friend.
Take care, George.